Today on the Bandrew Says podcast, I am going to be discussing if negative reviews kill companies, what some of my favorite value electronics are, and some other stuff too, so go ahead and stick around. Do negative reviews kill companies? I'm going to go out on a limb and say no, they do not. I will expand on this quite a bit, but first up, I want to address why I'm talking about this. Over the last week, MKBHD or Marques Brownlee, who is a very famous YouTube tech reviewer, put out a negative review of an AI pen, and after that review went live, apparently his negative coverage tanked the company. He put the company out of business with his negative review. Instead of linking all of the threads on X, I'm just going to link MKBHD's response to this in the episode notes and description. I highly recommend watching it for context and seeing what he has to say about this. What he has to say about this. But first up, we should address what is the purpose or what is the job of a tech reviewer or of a reviewer in general. The job of a reviewer is to help consumers make more informed purchasing decisions so they can hopefully waste less of their hard-earned money. That means that us as reviewers are going to share the positive as well as the negative, and the negative is likely going to be a bit more important because that is going to inform a purchaser's decision quite a bit more. What is going to go wrong if I buy this? And when a consumer is researching a product to buy, they certainly are not just going to consume one review. They are going to read multiple reviews, watch multiple reviews, and listen to multiple reviews. And because reviewers do inform consumers on what to buy and what not to buy, the obligation of a reviewer, or should I say, the party that a reviewer ought to be advocating for, is the end consumer as opposed to the company. Reviewers do not have an obligation to the company, to that company's sale. The obligation and the responsibility of a reviewer is to serve the end consumer. Another obligation or responsibility that reviewers have is towards accuracy, and I suppose you could argue this is a responsibility towards the company that is being reviewed, but it's also a responsibility to the end consumer because the information that you're presenting to that end consumer ought to be accurate. So you need to make sure that if you have an issue with the product you're reviewing, that you verify that is not a faulty unit, that is not something that is wrong with your specific unit. You also need to verify that you're using it correctly. You need to understand the product. I don't know why I pronounced that weird. You need to understand the product prior to reviewing it. You need to have a very firm understanding of what you are covering, and then you need to share that information accurately and honestly. So then we get to the next question. Why do negative reviews exist? And this is very important. Do negative reviews exist solely because reviewers love putting out negative coverage because it gets more clicks? I would argue no. This is anecdotal, but from personal experience, my least favorite type of review to make is negative. I feel terrible when I make a negative review because there are people behind those products who put their heart and soul into it in most cases. So I hate making negative reviews. So I would argue that is not why negative reviews exist. I believe that negative reviews exist not because people want clicks, but because there are flawed products out there. Every product has a flaw, and those who are looking to buy product X, Y, or Z should be aware of the flaws of that product prior to buying it. So then we get back to the original question. Do negative reviews kill companies? The reason I say no is assuming there is no conspiratorial, coordinated smear campaign going on, and how I wish there was because you know I love a conspiracy. But assuming that is not the case, negative reviews of products do not exist without subpar products being out there and these items that have deal-breaking flaws being available for sale to the end consumer. So if a company does go out of business following a bunch of negative reviews, I don't think it's the reviews that put the company out of business. First, I think it's the fact that that company released a flawed and subpar product, but ultimately, it's because the end consumer had the information to make a more informed purchasing decision to not waste their money on a disappointing product. And ultimately, I think that is a good thing because reviewers are advocates, or they ought to be advocates for that end consumer. Now, I also want to point something out. Reviewers will inevitably make mistakes, and we as reviewers have an obligation to ensure that we avoid those mistakes as much as possible. I am embarrassed to admit that I have made tons of mistakes over 9 years of reviewing audio gear, and there is a ton of guilt, at least in my case, a ton of guilt that goes along with making mistakes. Maybe I just take things a bit too hard. Maybe I take things a bit too seriously, but I feel terrible whenever I make a mistake in a review. But that is why I advocate people get multiple opinions before they buy something. Don't just take my opinion on a microphone because I do make mistakes. I also have only my own set of experiences, so you should be getting multiple people's opinions. You should be listening to multiple audio samples to make the most informed decision, because as much as I would love to say you should watch me, only recommend me, only use my affiliate links, and make me super duper rich, which I would love, that would be counter to my entire job. My job is to help you make informed decisions. The job of reviewers is to help the end consumer make more informed decisions. So you should not be taking a single review as the gospel. You should be getting multiple. Why am I over enunciating everything? This is insane. You should be getting multiple opinions on a product prior to reviewing it, because people do make mistakes. People have differing opinions. They have differing experiences, and they record in different environments if we're talking about audio gear. So that is my take on the entire situation. No, negative reviews do not kill companies. Bad products kill companies. And when consumers have the ability to make informed decisions to not buy disappointing products, that is what may kill a company. But I don't think that most companies rely on a single product. They typically have dozens of products. So if one product fails, hopefully, if the company is managed well, they won't go out of business and they can iterate and learn and improve. And then the next product will be better for the end consumer. And when the end consumer learns that the follow-up product is better and serves a need, then the company who has improved benefits. It is a win-win. It just takes a bit of work and ensuring you are offering value to the end consumer. Okay, I am done rambling. Check MKBHD's video in the description and show notes. Now let's talk about what I have been testing, and I'm going to say the thing. Full disclosure, this microphone is on loan from Lewitt. That is out of the way. I am on the new Lewitt Aura. This is kind of a new microphone. When I say that, I mean it is essentially the Lewitt LCT 440 Pure, just with some sensors in it and some new technology, which is super neat. But if you don't like the 440, you're not going to like this because it sounds like the 440. But what this does, it has an infrared sensor in it, and that sensor determines how close you are to the microphone, and it adjusts the microphone's output sensitivity as well as the EQ in real time. So I can get right on top of this thing, and if I don't clip, you shouldn't hear too much of... I'm actually going to shut off compression. If I get really close, you shouldn't hear too much change to the tone of the microphone. If I'm a little bit farther back, you shouldn't hear too much change to the tone of the microphone. And if I get really far away, what happens? It increases the level. With the increase in the level, of course, you are also getting an increase in the room tone and reflections. but it maintains a similar level to my voice. It maintains a similar tone to my voice. And isn't that neat? This is really cool tech because this is what the variable D technology that Electro Voice put out 50 or 60 years ago was doing. But that mainly focused on eliminating proximity effect. This does it where you can get farther away and it adjusts the level as well. You can get closer and it adjusts the level as well. Just really cool tech, and it also has a physical mute button, and you know I'm a sucker for that. Listen to it. Now I am talking and you can hear me. Then I am running it through a nice preamp. Full disclosure, I bought it with my own money. It is the Rupert Neve Designs Portico 5017. Let's throw that compression back on. I have the silk circuit engaged. I have some slight compression going on. I don't like overly compressing with this because it is very limited with its settings. You just have threshold unless you want to pop up the top and then mess with the internal jumpers on the PCB, which I do not want to do. If I did that, I would destroy this thing, and I don't have the high pass filter or anything. And then I'm running into the Universal Audio X. I don't know why I cannot speak today. I am over-enunciating, or I am going the opposite and just mumbling. I'm just going to do the rest of the podcast episode like this. I'm just going to talk like this the rest of the episode. Okay, that is it for what I have been testing. Let's jump to what you had to say. And the first comment comes from Sound Speeds. And what does he have to say? This may come as a shocker to you, but the Bandrew Says podcast channel is a personality-driven channel. I don't care what you talk about. I'm here to hear you talk about whatever. And then LX130 responded and said, yup, it could be 90 minutes of Bandrew starting a talk about hot giardiniera on pizza and go to digression after digression and ending on wool versus silk socks. I'd listen. Alan and LX, thank you very much for the comment. I had honestly never considered this podcast as a personality-driven endeavor because I do try to focus on adding information, and I had always assumed that people subscribed and watched for that information and that they just tolerated my insane diatribes and ramblings that led into random areas. I thought that was pushing it. All these tangents that I go on, I thought that was just testing people and they were just hanging on because they wanted the other information in there. So that really does mean a lot to me that you view this as a personality-driven channel and that you come by to hang out with me and to listen to me talk. That does mean a lot to me. But I am going to challenge you now because you bring up wool socks, and I just so happen to have opinions about wool socks. So let's talk about wool socks. For decades, I have worn cotton socks. And for decades, this sounds like an infomercial. For decades, I have had stinky shoes. Well, a couple of years ago, I made a switch from cotton socks to wool socks because I was on this endeavor to buy a bunch of made in the USA products, and it just so happens that Sound Speeds recommended Darn Tough socks, which are merino wool. I bought them because they were made in the USA, and then a few months later, I noticed something. My shoes no longer stunk. They were no longer stinky. And this was a revelation to me. This shook my entire world because I had even bought powder that you put in your shoes to try to get them not to stink. Why had nobody told me early on in my life that merino wool stops your feet and your shoes from stinking? That seems like important information. New information has come to light, man, and why had nobody told me about this? It's crazy. So for the past 4 years now, I have been wearing merino wool socks. I will never go back. Yes, these are expensive. They do have a lifetime warranty, I think, so if you put a hole in them, they'll just send you a new pair. I haven't tried that out because they're still holding up all right, but my shoes no longer stink. Please nobody screenshot this, and I know I can smell my slippers and they don't stink. I would not have been able to do that 4 years ago. I know I just changed somebody's life with that information, and hopefully that wasn't an individual who only comes for the information of the main topic and doesn't tolerate my insane ramblings, because if they do, they missed out on that nugget of life-changing information. Wool socks? Yup. How did you fare in that? Did my challenge scare you away? Or I guess you wouldn't even be able to respond if my challenge scared you away. LX, how did you hold up? Okay, let's go to the next comment from CallMayJed6175. He says, my Kindle Paperwhite is probably my favorite piece of technology. I've had my second one for years now, and it shows no signs of age. The first one got cartwheeled down a flight of concrete steps. It still worked after even that, but the casing was cracked in multiple places, which made it awkward to hold. And then I got a comment from Enrique Con9405, and he says, not enough people talk about the greatest advantage of ebooks. You can adjust the font and size to suit your necessities. And yeah, in my opinion, the Paperwhite is one of those things that somehow got almost everything right. I just wish the USB port was on top or side of the device. Enrique and Call, thank you very much for the comments, and thank you for sharing your feedback on the Kindle. You sharing your love for the Kindle Paperwhite really got me thinking. That is a really great value. So what are the best value pieces of electronics in my life that I have encountered? Number one for me is the Kindle Paperwhite. I bought this 9 years ago in 2015. It is nearly 10 years old. I haven't used it a tremendous amount, but it still shows no signs of wear. The battery still holds a charge for weeks. The screen is still usable. The device is still updated and usable. It is not obsolete, and that is incredibly rare nowadays. Nowadays, if you spend $100 on a device, you should likely expect that to be obsolete in 2-3 years. This is 9 years, going on 10 very soon, and it is still functioning like day one. So number one value piece of tech for me is the Kindle Paperwhite. Number two for me is the SanDisk ClipJam MP3, which is a tiny MP3 player. This thing is cheap, functional, and fairly full-featured. It is micro SD expandable with a slot on the side. It has podcast playback and functionality. It has Audible integration if you use a PC, and I think it's limited to Windows 10, but you can put Audible books on here. It's tiny. The battery lasts for days without issue, and I did have a scare with this. I dropped this last week, and the screen went dead. I thought it was broken, and I was putting a piece of masking tape on the back and saying, died on this date because I dropped it. And while it was on the counter, it must have gotten scared by that note because it started working again. So I don't need to buy a replacement. It's still working. $25, I think, and it's going on a year so far and still working great, even after a drop. And the final item for me is, what a shocker, a wristwatch. It is a classic Casio G-Shock. This thing is affordable, it is functional, it is durable, it has the time, the day, the date, an alarm, an hourly chime, which you may have heard in this episode, a timer, and a stopwatch. And I also have the older 5600 model here, and that has the electroluminescent backlight as opposed to an LED backlight. It just looks so much better because the lighting is even and it has this greenish glow. The new LED light has a point of hotness coming in from the side, and it is more white. Typical LED, it's not pleasing to look at, so the older electroluminescence is amazing. And what do all of these items have in common? They don't become obsolete after a year. after 2 years, after 3 years. They are all very full-featured. They are all reliable. They are all affordable. They are all what I deem to be very high value because you pay 30 to 40 bucks for a watch. You can wear this for a decade until you have to replace the battery. You can get replacement straps. You can occasionally send it into G-Shock to get repaired. The Kindle Paperwhite, no maintenance needed, 10 years on. SanDisk ClipJam MP3, perfectly functional for everything I need except for high definition, lossless audio, audiophile playback. Other than that, does everything that I need. If you have favorite value technology, favorite value electronics, let me know in the comments because I'm very curious what other people are using. I find this topic so interesting. Where can we spend our money the most wisely? All of these items, people may not look at it and think, that's the highest quality piece of tech out there. But it is money well spent in my opinion. I don't regret a single one of these purchases years on. Let me know in the comments down below what your picks are, and maybe I will do a follow-up if I ever think of more that meet these standards, these high standards, this high bar that has been set by these items. The last comment we have comes from Josh Coletta. He says, on the point about hunting EQ frequencies, I'll pass along something I was taught very early on. Learn what frequencies correspond to each trait of the human voice so that you don't have to hunt. It takes some time, of course, but once you understand that the boxy sound is around 800 Hz or sibilance falls between 5 to 8 kilohertz or so, then you can start to listen to your raw recordings and say, okay, these S's are too sharp. Let's pull down 6.5K, about 3 decibels, and see how that sounds, and then you can tweak it from there. And in fact, I almost never boost anything while tweaking. I always cut because that's just the way my brain works. If I get more of the sound I don't want, my brain doesn't always process that it's the correct frequency. It might just be another frequency that doesn't sound right when I bump it. If the sound I don't want suddenly goes away, then I know I'm on the right track. Your mileage may vary, but I would suggest that approach regardless just to start with. Josh, thank you very much for the feedback. That is absolutely fantastic advice. Next time I need to do some serious EQing, I am going to try this method. I am going to try cutting to find that frequency as opposed to boosting to locate that frequency because I think you're right. As the caller from last week pointed out, if I boost it by 20 decibels, everything sounds bad. I want to cut everything because every single frequency sounds terrible. So I think this is likely the more effective way to go about it. It's likely just a bit more difficult because you do need to have that more understanding of what sounds associate with what frequencies. Thank you very much, Josh. I had to include that because that is great advice. That is it for what you had to say. We are now jumping to value for value because this is a V for V podcast. What that means, I do not put this behind a paywall. I do not have ads. I put the show out there, and if you get any value out of it, just send that value back in whatever way you think is appropriate or that you are able. You can do time, talent, treasure. Do you want to make a thumbnail? Do you want to clip something? Do you want to tell me what to clip? Do you want to give me an amazing title? That is all valuable. Or if you just want to send your money this direction, that is also helpful in keeping the podcasting bills paid. Today, we have one super thanks from TechMed Raina Richter with €25, and he says, Danke. Raina, thank you so much for the €25, and thank you so much for the continued support. Seriously, it baffles me. It means the world to me, and I appreciate you so deeply. So, Raina, thank you very much for all that you do to support this show and keep it ad-free. Also, This show is ad-free, so if you enjoy it being ad-free, it is because of wonderful people like Raina and those who support the show in the prior weeks as well. So thank you to them, and thank you to you. And now let's jump to my favorite part of the show, the Ask Bandrew segment. Welcome to the Ask Bandrew segment, the segment where you ask me, Bandrew, and I attempt to answer you questionnaire. If you want to submit a question, go to askbandrew.com, askbandrew.com, askbandrew.com. There are instructions on how to send in audio, video, and text. I do prefer audio and video because then I don't have to read. You get a break from hearing me talk. And we get to hear how you sound on your equipment, which is just fun for everybody. More samples to make informed decisions with. First and only, we have a voice submission from Rick. Take it away, Rick.
Hey, Bandrew, this is Rick here. I am on one of those ridiculous tiny microphones. I've got it plugged into a Rode VXLR Pro and into my Motu M2 interface. I was given this ridiculous microphone as a gift, and I never use it, so I figured I might as well use it now to ask you a question. Hopefully I'm not irritating you with it. Anyway, my question is about the Rode NT1. I bought it due to recommendations from guys like you and Tom Buck and Mike Delgadio, and I've loved it. The noise floor is amazing. It has served me really well doing voiceover projects from home. Now, for the longest time, I've wanted to upgrade to something a little better. So when the Rode NT1 5th Gen came out, I thought maybe I could use that. The Rode NT1 for the longest time was going for about $260. So when the NT1 5th Gen came out at the same price, I figured maybe I could sell my 4th Gen for maybe around $200. Unfortunately, I hesitated. And that proved to be a mistake because several months later, Rode came out with the NT1 Signature series for a lot cheaper. Suddenly, my Rode NT1 4th Gen, the resale value plummeted, and I can no longer sell it at around $200. So my question, Bandrew, is this. Is there something that's better about the Rode NT1 4th Gen as compared to the Signature series? Please, Bandrew, tell me that there is something better about it so I don't feel so bad about not pulling the trigger when I should have. Thanks so much, Bandrew, and more power to you.
Rick, thank you very much for the audio feedback. I really do appreciate you taking your time to do that. You sound great. Your question is, are the 4th Gen Rode NT1 and the NT1 Signature models identical? They are not identical, but they are incredibly similar. The Signature series has a self-noise listed at 4 dBA, while the 4th Gen is listed at 4.5 dBA. So the Signature series is half a dBA lower. The max SPL of the Signature series is 10 decibels higher at 142 decibels, I believe, and the sensitivity of the Signature series is 3 decibels lower at minus 32 dB versus the 29 dB of the NT1 4th Gen. The frequency response, on the other hand, is quite an interesting topic. Now, they appear to be identical. In the past, the NT1 4th Gen had a very flat and neutral-looking frequency response curve. They updated it, and now it looks identical to that of the NT1 5th Gen and the NT1 Signature series. This was pointed out to Rode on Twitter, and somebody contacted Rode, and I will link this tweet in the episode notes and description so you can see the response from Rode. The reason there was this shift, in the past, Rode was using 1 octave smoothing on their frequency response curves, and they recently switched to half octave smoothing to show more detail on the response curves. It is a shame that this is the case because a lot of people bought that original NT1, or I should say the 4th gen NT1, because they thought it was flat. They thought they were buying a microphone that was incredibly flat. At the time that I reviewed the NT1 originally, that was the most expensive microphone that I had. And when I looked at the response curve, I saw a flat line with a little bit of a bump. So what did I do? I associated the sound of the NT1 with that of a flat microphone. This is what a flat microphone is supposed to sound like. And unless you have access to hundreds of microphones and a lot of experience, you're not going to know any better. That is going to be your point of reference. The graph shows that this is flat. I know what that microphone sounds like, and going forward, that is now my association as what a flat microphone sounds like, with just a 1 dB bump in the treble area. But in reality, the microphone that may have been thought to be flat was a 4 or 5 dB bump around 10 kilohertz, which is not flat. So the frequency response graphs, although they look significantly different from what had been published a couple of years ago, is actually identical. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, but I believe the NT1 4th Gen doesn't have any significant improvements over the NT1 5th Gen or the NT1 Signature series. I don't have the Signature series, so I'm not able to do a direct A-B comparison. Maybe I will eventually be able to do that, but at this time I can't. So I cannot say for certain, because I think a big flaw would be to trust those frequency response graphs after learning what had been done and how it had been handled in the past. So what I can say is, based on the publications from Rode, they appear to be the same, but take that with a grain of salt. I will not know or be able to say with any amount of certainty that they are the same or that they are not the same until I have the NT1 Signature series in my hand and I am able to do a direct A-B comparison between the NT1 4th and the Signature series. So I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but yeah, seems like as of now, they are very similar. Somebody may want that 4th gen, though. I'm not sure. I have learned a very important lesson over the last couple of years, though, and that would be perhaps we shouldn't rely so heavily on frequency response graphs because they can be extremely misleading, especially if those graphs are published by the manufacturer. I have fallen trap to this because I am a YouTuber. I am a very flawed person, so I would look at other YouTubers who were being more analytical. I would look at Julian Krause with how he handles interfaces, and I would think, I want to be more like that. I want to be more objective, more scientific, more analytical, have something that isn't purely a qualitative analysis. It's more quantitative. But with that, I just ran into more issues where I would rely more on that than my ears, and that is a sign, that is a recipe for disaster. That is one of the worst things you can do. The first thing you should be using to judge a microphone is the sound of the microphone, not some squiggly lines on a piece of paper. Who cares if it's a Q on the paper, if it's a mountain range? Use your ears, listen to recordings made with it, and judge it based on that, not some stupid graph published by a manufacturer. And I learned the hard way because I made a fool of myself with a couple of analyses that I did where I focused too heavily on the published response graph as opposed to just listening. That is my lesson. I will link the X post or the twitter.com post where somebody shared this response from Rode saying, yeah, we changed the smoothing from 1 octave to half octave. And that is going to wrap up today. Thank you very much for coming by to my personality-driven channel. I appreciate you coming by, spending your time with me. Sincerely, I know you could be doing anything with your time. You could be reading a book, listening to another podcast, watching a movie, watching a TV show, hanging with friends, spending time with family and loved ones. The fact that you choose to spend your time with me is deeply appreciated, and I am honored, and I try not to waste your time. I try to make it valuable and enjoyable, and hopefully I succeed at that. So thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing, how far off of the microphone was I? I just felt like I just kept drifting off. I hope you have an amazing Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Next Sunday, I will be back. I will be talking at you. I will be talking with you. Let me know your favorite value technology, and I will talk to you then. Bye-bye. Whoa, whoa, boop.
This has been a Geeks Rising production. Your executive producer is Bandrew Scott. For more information, head over to www.geeksrising.com.